Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault 2, and I'm coming to you tonight with another Garage Gun Talk. And yeah, I got my glasses on tonight. I am a little bit tired, and I've been editing for quite a few hours. I was working on editing the range footage and the garage portion of a range report on a Ruger Mark IV SD, which is an intricately suppressed, essentially 2245 target pistol, and working on that. And that range report I think came out really well. It's actually rendering right now, and I was going to make a range report on this gun today, which I showed you, I believe, in the previous video, the Beretta 21A Inox or Inox, one of those cool tip-up barrel 22s. And when I was editing the range footage for it, I discovered there was a problem, and I'm going to have to go back to the range tomorrow and film all the footage again. In that the camera, I guess on its autofocus, its programming and its software always wants to focus in on essentially anything that's in the center kind of square of the frame, but that looks like a human being. And somebody at the range, when I was filming that, had a target out because they were in the lane next to me, had one of the, like the orange silhouettes. And so he was out there at about 7 yards, and all the footage of me shooting this gun is out of focus because it's blurry here. My target is blurry, but that target in the lane next to me is clear as a bell. So I was like, I'm not happy with it. It's too much. There are times it is in focus, and there's times it's not in focus. So I'm just going to go back and do the whole thing again and do it right. There was also a lot of footage where people were shooting kind of rapid fire, a lot of talking. So it just didn't come out like I was hoping. So I got to go to the range tomorrow and film all the footage again for this, which hopefully won't take too long because I know what to film. And my wife did a good job. She was really upset when I told her because she takes a little bit of pride in wanting to help me create all the content. And she goes to the range and, deals with all the intricacies of that. One of the complaints we've been having about my range lately, it's the Frisco Gun Club. And by the way, if I sound like I'm a little bit sniffly, it's because I think I'm getting a sinus infection because I can smell it. I can always smell a sinus infection. But I'm a little bit stuffed up and congested. But at our range, which we pay a lot of money to be members of, we have this, I don't know, I think I've explained it before, there's like 35 or 40 lanes, and there's like, the main area is like 30 lanes, and that's like the public range. Then there's the next like 5 lanes, like 31 through 35, is typically where they do the classes and the competitions, the IDPA stuff and all that. And then the last bay, 36 through 40 or whatever the number is, they're the private VIP lanes, and we have biometric access from the outside to get just into that area. And for whatever reason, their AC unit has been either down or the heater's been down. Anyway, it is just crazy cold in there. And often when I go and film, if it's just a little bit cool outside, it's freezing in this place. I guess the heater doesn't work. And you can even see her breath. And she hates it. My wife is very sensitive to the cold. She hates going there. And I always tell her, I can just take the tripod and do it. But she wants to be a part of it. And so she feels bad because, she put some time into helping me make this. And she suffered through it. And now I have to go back and do it again. But tomorrow, because I have the day off, it's President's Day, I'm just going to take the tripod. My wife has to work. So I'll go suffer through the crazy conditions there. But anyway, I got to go do that. So I'm a little bit sad, but I did get 2 videos. I got the field strip video of that Ruger and the range report of that Ruger done today and edited, and it's going up. And my Patreons will see it soon. What else did I want to talk about tonight? I wanted to do a little addendum to the video that I made last time regarding the assault weapons bans in some states, because the day after I made that, I saw that Pennsylvania was another state that is trying to pass this, and they have this overwhelming Democrat majority. So I feel sorry for those people in those states. And I just want to reiterate, until the Supreme Court steps in and says something one way or the other, I don't think you're going to see an end to this. I just don't think you're going to see an end to it. And those assault weapons bans, in my opinions, are the essentially the death of the Second Amendment, because it bans so much. So the guns that are left for you to buy are so anemic and so ineffectual that they're really no good for the true cause of what the Second Amendment is for, which is, of course, repelling tyranny, both domestic and foreign. That in the future, as of course we already know what's going to happen, a person that is wanting to do some type of mass tragedy event is going to get a hold of a gun that they can still get a hold of, and they're going to commit an atrocity with it. And then what are the politicians going to do? Well, it didn't go far enough, the assault weapons ban. And then all of a sudden they're going to add another feature and another feature and another thing. And then somebody will do an atrocity with 10-round magazines. Well, now we have to have 5-round magazines. It never ends. And that is the end of the Second Amendment. And it's a cancer. It's a disease that is just spreading. And it's a shame that our Republican representatives don't fight back. But they just don't fight back. But that was for last time's video. But I did want to mention that Pennsylvania, and I think somebody in the comment section said, I can't believe you forgot about Illinois. And yeah, I know. Or Illinois. Is it Illinois or Illinois? I know you're not supposed to pronounce the S maybe. I forgot. I'm not from there. But anyway, yeah, they're one of the usual suspects anyway. I mean, the governor, was it Prinkster? Anyway, whatever his name is, starts with a P. He's a dictator. We all know it. But let's talk about the other fun thing I want to mention tonight, and I want to talk about law enforcement for a second here. And I know that I have some people that follow this channel and the main channel that are, I'm going to call them fans, that are in law enforcement. And I'm kind of curious about their perspective. I think by now you guys have all seen the footage of this police officer in, I believe it's Florida, walking by his car, which he had just detained a suspect or arrested a suspect, put him in handcuffs, put him in the back of his cruiser, and this acorn, I guess, drops from a tree and just, dings the car, and he goes, shots fired, shots fired. He does like 3 barrel rolls, and then he takes his firearm out and he just unloads into the car, and he's saying, I'm hit. And then his partner, not knowing what's going on, he's saying it's in the car, and she just unloads into the car. And it's, of course, it's funny, it's comical. I'm glad that nobody was hurt. The person inside the car was not hurt. And I'm glad that, obviously, because these to use, I guess, a poker term, these officers were on tilt. They were just crazy. And I'm glad that cooler heads prevailed, I guess, at the end, because that guy was probably in that car. He couldn't tell them, I'm not armed, I'm handcuffed, stop shooting at me. And I'm glad that when they opened the car, which I'm sure they did, they probably pulled him out and threw him on the ground and all that kind of stuff. And he was handcuffed the whole time. There were no shots fired. He didn't have a gun. He was handcuffed. And can you only imagine the riots that would have ensued if that person would have been shot and killed? Can you only imagine? But I'm glad nobody was hit, nobody was hurt, and that's why it's comical. It's like that Reno 911 show. It's absolutely bizarre. And the thing that makes me upset about this story, because there is something that makes me upset about the story, because I think everybody can see the problem here, that you had officers that just would do this type of thing and not think about the ramifications, because there's a few rules of gun safety, right? We know about finger off the trigger, but most importantly, don't point the handgun at anything you don't want to destroy or kill, and know what your target is and what lies beyond. They were in a public place on a public street, and I believe there was a park right next door. And this guy had no idea. Okay, let's just say he believed his life was in danger, number one, which I don't believe he was. I don't know. I've been around cars when they've been hit by acorns. Okay, so I know what it sounds like, and I would never confuse that with a gunshot. But he essentially shot his car up, not thinking, without even knowing where the shots were coming from, if he thought they were shooting, and just unloaded. And what lies beyond that car, we have no idea. In the video, it looks like there's like a housing development. I know there's a park next door. There were people out there, and he's just on the ground, rolling around, discharging his weapon, not even knowing what he's shooting at. And then his partner, the female officer, does almost exactly the same thing. And if they're shooting into a car and they're shooting into the windows of the car, well, that bullet can easily travel through one window, out the other, and go into that park. That whole thing is bizarre to me. But what makes me so sad, sorry, I shouldn't say sad. What makes me so mad about this story is that upon investigation of the incident, the officers were cleared of any wrongdoing because they said of the main officer, the guy that was like rolling on the ground saying he was hit and shots fired and started the whole thing, that they said that he had reasonable belief and he acted reasonably because he thought he was being fired at. And his partner was also found to be reasonable in her actions because she was trusting the word of her partner who said he was hit and shots were fired. So I don't put as much blame on her, even though when I watch her body camera video, you don't hear any other shot. He just starts screaming, shots fired, shots fired. She has no idea what's going on. But you would think you would hear that first shot. But I still think she did not act reasonably because she didn't know the threat. She couldn't see the threat. And she wasn't thinking about what lied beyond that target. So she endangered the public. But when it comes to the primary officer, the guy that made a fool of himself, there is no way that any reasonable person would think that what he did was okay. And I'll tell you why. And this is the standard that I think police officers need to be held to. I am sick and tired. And as I said, I know there's police officers and people in law enforcement that watch my videos. And they may disagree with me. And if that's fine. And I want them to tell me why in the comments if they do. I believe that qualified immunity needs to be repealed. Okay? Or extremely limited in scope, because I am getting sick and tired. And I think this is people of all political stripes, and regardless of what you think about law enforcement. I know there's a lot of people that are just, the cops can't do anything wrong, and there's people that are, the cops never do anything right, okay? I fall in the middle of this, okay? I see bad cops and good cops, okay? We all hear the stories of cops that pretty much have egos and step on everyone's rights, whether that be a traffic stop or whatever, or how they handle interactions with the common citizenry. They're arrogant, they're mean, they're vindictive. And then you hear stories about other cops that go above and beyond when it comes to kindness and heroism and all these types of things. So there's the whole spectrum. So I fall in the middle. I typically have a distrust of law enforcement. And I don't like to interact with them in any capacity. I don't care if they're doing good or bad, only because they have things like qualified immunity, and they can do things with impunity at times just because they feel like it. If they're not wearing body cameras and they write you or they pull you over for speeding, in theory, they could just say, oh, he was belligerent, I arrested him for, resisting arrest or whatever. And you're like, no, what are you talking about? No, I didn't. And it's just because they don't like you, or they have an axe to grind, or maybe you say, I'm going to choose not to say anything. If an officer starts questioning you, you have the right just to say, officer, I am choosing not to answer any questions. And that can just set them off. And I've watched body cam video of those police audits where people say that, and these cops go crazy, okay? I'm not saying every cop is like that, obviously. But they get this qualified immunity that as long as they were doing things in the necessity of their job, they're immune from prosecution. And I think when it comes to depriving people of their rights and doing things like discharging a firearm, they need to be held to a higher standard because they are essentially given a license to kill. And so this officer, is found to be reasonable in his actions, I think is an absolute travesty. Because what if you or I carrying a weapon? Let's just say I was carrying this even like this little tiny Beretta 21A Bobcat and 22 long rifle. And let's just say I am walking to my car at the mall with my family, okay? And an acorn falls on a car that I'm walking next to. And I think to myself, I am being shot at. And I pull this weapon out in self-defense, and I think somebody inside the car is shooting at me because I saw somebody in the car, an acorn hit the car. And I pulled this gun out, and I just went, shots fired, everybody get down. And I took this gun and I unloaded it into that car. What would happen to me legally? Well, we all know what would happen to me legally, right? I would be arrested. Nobody would come to my defense. The police wouldn't come to me and say, oh, you had a reasonable belief that you were being shot at. People would say you're an irresponsible gun owner. You're too anxious. You're too high strung because a little acorn hitting car. No reasonable person would look at those actions if I did that in that scenario and think that I'm innocent. People, even very pro-gun people, would say you put people's lives in jeopardy. You discharged a weapon when your life was not in danger. You acted irresponsibly, and so forth. Nobody, anti-gun and pro-gun, would say that if I did that in that scenario, that I would have been reasonable in my actions. Everybody would make fun of me. However, when it's a police officer, and remember, he had the situation under control. He had the person in handcuffs and had just searched him and put him in his vehicle. So that person was in a controlled environment, and he still discharged his weapon like that. But yet he is found to be reasonable. Now, he did resign from the police force, and I think every law enforcement officer out there, and most people in gun owners are laughing at him for his barrel roll and all that kind of weird stuff, and him being, I'm just going to say it, a coward, and I don't know. Why did he say he was hit? Maybe he was rolling around on the ground and a rock hit his leg or something, and he thought I don't know. I have no earthly idea what the hell happened. But he should not be a police officer, and that police department should not have found him to be reasonable in his actions. And I think the only reason they did was because they knew if they found him guilty, number one, the amount of money that they would be liable for, but also the riots. I really do believe there would have been riots. But the whole thing is bizarre to me, and it makes me distrust law enforcement more, not just the officers themselves, but also the administration, because there is no way, as I said, anybody can find this to be reasonable, but they found this to be a reasonable action. And I personally hope whoever the person is in that car that was arrested sues the crap out of that police department. And I'm glad he is not hurt. I think if he would have been hit, he'd have an even bigger claim. And if he would have been killed, his family could have sued that for millions, and that town would have burned down. But I don't know. I don't know. I am getting tired of police officers and law enforcement in general just following orders, okay? Because I know what people are going to say in the law enforcement community. They're going to say they want to go home at the end of the night. And I agree with that. But I also think that if you are not willing to be held to a higher standard and you still want to go home at the end of the night, then you shouldn't be a police officer. You have that choice. But I believe people that are given a badge and a gun, and even in districts where, gun ownership, like in New York City, you can't carry a gun anywhere. Civilians are barred from it essentially 100%. But you are given the special power of life and death, and your word holds up in court more than the common citizenry. And if you don't have your body camera on, and you just essentially arrest somebody, you can just in your police report say, yeah, there's no witnesses, but they resisted arrest. And just because you don't like them, what are they going to do? What's the judge going to do? Well, I got a police officer saying this, and I got a defendant saying he didn't do it. There's no evidence one way. I'm going to believe the police officer. And you'll have heavy-handed prosecutors or whatever. So I personally feel that qualified immunity needs to be restricted or repealed completely. And I believe that police officers individually, when it comes to gross negligence of the deprivation of people's rights or the possible endangerment of society and people in society, their qualified immunity should not apply. It should not be applicable. I personally believe that if a police officer arrests somebody and later a court looks at this and goes, this is a gross infringement upon somebody's civil liberties, and that police officer in the moment was just pissed off and deprived them of whatever and just said, "I'll just let the courts handle it." Because think about this too. When people go to court, let's just say they arrest a poor person, okay? And most of the people that get involved in law enforcement interactions are typically middle class and poor, okay? Most of the time. The vast majority of those things. They can't afford a lawyer. They can't afford losing their job and not going to work for days because they're in jail. They can't afford having that on their record. They can't afford all that stuff. They can't. So they can't fight it. It destroys their life. But the police officer has to go home at the end of the day, right? These police officers have so much power. And I just feel like if they do this and it's a gross infringement of rights, they should be able to be held personally liable. So not only can you sue the city and the police department for this infringement, you should be able to sue that police officer individually. So they're on the hook for having to pay tens of thousands of dollars in court fees and have to reimburse somebody that is found to be innocent and of a gross, no, I'm not saying like a basic crime. I'm talking about like, and everything looks reasonable. I'm talking about where you look at this and go, this person did absolutely nothing wrong. And a judge or a magistrate or an appeals court looks at this and goes, this is a gross infringement of civil liberties. And this police officer went above and beyond when it comes to the deprivation of liberties. That police officer should be liable for all of the legal fees and lost wages and all that. They should be on the hook because they should be held to a higher standard. And I know some law enforcement are probably going to say that's too much. But I'm telling you, trust is eroding between civilians and law enforcement all the time. And it's on both sides of the aisle. We already know what the left thinks, right? With the whole defund the police are bad, the police are racist, whatever. The things that just keep saying and saying and saying and saying and saying. But even with the people on the right that have been traditionally conservative and pro-police are losing their faith in police officers because they're just doing their job. I always talk about like the COVID lockdown stuff. Police officers would go to people running a salon or a restaurant during the COVID lockdowns. Completely unconstitutional. Put these people out of work, close the businesses, arrest the store owner for doing something that is completely lawful. And they're just doing their jobs because they want to go home at the end of the night, right? And of course, they want that paycheck. They got no problem taking that paycheck, right? And putting other people out of work and making sure they don't have a paycheck, right? Because they're special and above the law. They're above everybody else. And so that is eroding the faith of people like me in law enforcement. Now, every time I see a cop, I'm not saying that I'm anxious or worried. I just avoid it. Avoid them, and I don't look at them with as much respect as I used to. The person may be a great cop, a wonderful person, and does his job honorably and well. But because police, the good cops in the profession, don't call out the bad cops, and don't organize and say, we have to get rid of these people. And I'm sure people that are in law enforcement that are good and honorable and ethical, they probably know somebody else in the force that is not. Somebody that might be on the take. Somebody that they know is heavy-handed. But maybe that person that's heavy-handed is a sergeant and they're just low, but nobody speaks out. Nobody seems to speak out, and there doesn't seem to be any mechanism for review. And it's eroding the faith that people have in law enforcement. And this video goes a long way in just proving that. Not only because the actions were silly and stupid, thank God nobody was hurt, but because the police department, or the sheriff's department in this case, said the officer acted reasonably. Yeah, that's just inexcusable in my personal opinion. So anyway, what do you guys think about this whole incident? If you haven't seen it, maybe I'll post a link in the description below where you guys can go watch the video, because it is absolutely like something out of Reno 911. And if you're a law enforcement officer, tell me what you think. Am I off base on this? What do you think about what this video and the actions of this sheriff department do to your profession? And are you upset with me, or agree or disagree about my thoughts on qualified immunity being repealed? I think it has to be repealed. I think it has to be. It's getting to a point where it's almost becoming destructive of law enforcement, where bad cops, when they're caught doing bad things, get off, and it just erodes the trust. So anyway, that's what I want to talk about tonight. Maybe I'll find some cool meme or something that I can use as the thumbnail, but we'll see. But anyway, if you made it to the end of tonight's video, let's use the word acorn, because acorn is what started all of this, and it's pretty funny. And as I said, thank God nobody was hurt. And yeah, let me know about your thoughts on my thoughts. I'd love to know. So I'll go to the range tomorrow and refilm this thing, and probably take a different gun to get some more footage on another range report. So, as always, thanks for watching.